There we go.
Okay. Okay.
Good. All right, Daniel, I thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. How are you?
I'm terrific, Glenn. Thank you. And it's great to be with you.
Great. What I want to ask you right away is a hard question,
Hmm.
unfair question. What is it about you or your service that most people don't know? Maybe they get it wrong, but what is it about your service or you?
So I'll give you a short story. I had finished up a project for a large state agency. It was an agency that regulates 450,000 healthcare providers. And they were by any measure a mess. They were operationally, they were, let's just say, a dysfunctional family.
Okay.
And they had 160 employees and finished up the project. There was a lot of hope. There was a lot of anticipation, even though it was going to take probably 18 to 24 months to implement everything that we had done. And I was having my last conversation with the deputy director, and had my coat on, I had my computer bag, I had my hand on the door. I was ready to walk out the door, and in almost a tone of confession, she said, I don't even tell my friends where I work anymore.
Oh,
And I turned around, I said, why? She said, it's just too embarrassing. And that was just one moment. There were several others, but it was one of those sort of transformational moments where I thought, what a shame. And to the point where it's almost criminal that organizations would accept mediocrity, mediocre performance,
yes.
and actually rob their workforce of working for an organization of excellence.
Yeah.
And that hit one of those sort of passion buttons for me, where I thought it wasn't just a single moment in time, but over time and with several other conversations with various clients that sort of went that same way, I thought, I want to change that. I want to figure out how to change that. And so that's been the sort of the passion of my life for the last 5 or 6 years.
And it really is hard for companies to really understand the passion is to create excellence. What do you think caused that messiness? What was the root cause of it? You said the company was a mess. What was the root cause of that? If you can go back, I'm sure you weren't there when they started this happening, but what do you think that root cause was?
There's several things. In that particular case, it was a state agency.
Yeah.
And and although I've had people say it's the state, that's the government for you. No, it's not the government for you. I have found that same kind of apathy towards excellence in every segment of industry. So it's not just government. But in that particular case, the executive leadership, which was appointed by the governor, they are rewarded for their position in relationship to the governor. They weren't rewarded for taking care of their customers, their constituents, if you will. They weren't rewarded for having employees who were engaged with their mission, which was important.
Yes, it is.
They weren't rewarded for listening to the rank and file on how to improve the organization. And so what happens, and I've seen this hundreds of times, where there's this disconnect between executive leadership and like everybody else. And I've seen this dozens of times. I go into an organization and they say, we need you to help this group over here. And I say, okay. And somewhere in that conversation, I'll have a conversation go something like this. So when you, as the directors of this group, the CEOs of this group, whatever it is, if you had to define your strategic advantages, what would they be? And invariably they will say, oh, we have this amazing staff. They do the miraculous every day. We could not get by without them. And they are just heaping praise on their staff, which is nice.
Okay.
And then I go and I start working with their staff.
Okay.
They are universally exhausted,
Oh,
underappreciated.
okay.
They feel like their voice is not heard nor even cared to be heard. And that's a disconnect that I see all the time.
See, And I have always often wondered, because you see that a lot, where there's disconnect of maybe the executive board doesn't trust the workers, but I also see it where they give, like you said, they gave a lot of praise. I wonder, is a two-part question, but I wonder how much of that praise they're telling you is window dressing.
No, yeah, it's a great question. And frankly, I don't know if it's window dressing or if it's just make believe. And maybe they truly believe that they have an amazing staff. And I wouldn't discount that at all. But when you talk to the staff, when I talk to the staff, there's this thing of, it's nice that they tell you that, but they never tell us that.
Yes. Yeah.
So give you a short example. I was doing this project for a fairly small rural hospital. And I was meeting initially with their senior leadership over like a 4 or 5 day period, looking at their mission, their vision, their values, their operational practices, high level stuff, what they wanted to accomplish, both internally with themselves, with their patients. It's also a community owned hospital, so with the broader community as well. And over 2 or 3 days, we had all this stuff up on a wall. And we had intentionally wanted to get the input of the next level down in terms of leadership.
Sure.
And so a woman by the name of Eileen, who is the chief operating officer at the time, she had specifically identified probably 10, 15 of the middle management type folks. And so they came walking in the room. Everybody else had left. Only Eileen was there.
Yes. Yeah.
And they looked at the ideas on the wall and big ideas of where the hospital wanted to go. And almost in unison, watch my body language, almost in unison, they went like this. And just kind of verbally said, I don't think so. Not the way we're staffed right now, not the way we operate now. I don't think so.
Withdrew from the whole thing.
Verbally, and then physically just went like this. And I was looking over at Eileen because she is responsible for all these people. And I thought, man, there is opportunity for an explosion going on here.
Yep.
And to Eileen's credit, and she is a woman that she's retired now, but I've said many times, if I wanted to be in healthcare administration, I would drive 200 miles a day just to watch her operate.
Wow.
And she, when we got done with all this discussion, and it actually took everything that we were doing that week, and it just pivoted. We pivoted like 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And at the end, at the end of this conversation with these middle manager types, I had to get Eileen to address what had just happened. So I said, Eileen, how are you feeling right now? And she said, I so appreciate and so value the opportunity of working with people like this who are so passionate about their work that they're willing to be honest with me.
Yes. Yeah. That's the key thing, building that trust.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the key issue.
And she did not take offense to anything that anybody said. I knew I had been around her enough. I could read her body language. So I knew she was taking some hits, but she totally affirmed what they were saying. She thanked them for it. And how often do you see that kind of thing happen?
No, you don't. That's the difference between, to coin the phrase, or to use a phrase that's been coined, a servant leader.
Yep.
And the military, old style military leader. Not a big fan of either one of those. So let's say you don't have an Eileen. What would you do to train other leaders, especially in a senior CEO kind of position, create that level of empathy, that level of caring, and saying, okay, I can be self-assessed and I can assess others?
Great question. And there's no simple, easy answer to that. But
just kidding.
Sorry. Let me back up just a little bit. After the conversation with the woman I mentioned previously, who had this moment of confession with me, there were several other conversations like that, not with that much sort of impact, but and actually in retrospect, I've had that same conversation dozens of times.
Sure, yeah.
And in working with this hospital with Eileen and the other senior executives there, actually the CEO, not too long after that, the CEO asked me to come see him And I sat down in his office and he said, I want to design a formal model. That was the word he used. A formal model, a way of doing leadership in this hospital.
Oh,
And I said, that's great. You need to know, though, that I think organizationally, leadership is more about the system, the model, the way we do leadership,
yes.
as opposed to a collection of individuals exercising power.
Oh boy.
And I said, the first thing we will need to do is to identify what the system is supposed to produce, because every system produces something. And he said, that's exactly what I want to do. And without
Well, think about that.
exaggeration, I walked out the door. I said to myself, now, how in the heck am I going to do this?
Yeah, that's got to be a tough mission. But if you think about the beauty of that, if it's a system, then anybody who's trainable and has the right attitude can jump into that system.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you for seeing that. I could say that a lot of times, and people go, oh, yeah, that's nice. But that's exactly the point.
Yeah,
And
they don't look at it that way. But
so you asked the question, how do you instill that empathy, that great responses when people attack you and
yes,
you're a senior leader? In this particular project, with this particular healthcare organization, in meeting with Eileen, the CEO, and Eric, the CEO, and a guy named Rick, the CFO, the first thing we started out with is, what do you want the system to produce? What do you want it to do? And this really gets back to your prior question. And we had lots of conversation. We put ideas up on the wall, and it was like it was going nowhere until my friend Eileen, in her usual wisdom, was really quiet. And I'd been around her enough, I could read the body language. And so finally I said, Eileen, what are you thinking? And she said, we can't produce exceptional health, which is a statement out of their vision. We can't produce exceptional health until our people, our employees, feel that they are empowered to make the extra phone call.
Okay, yeah, that's so key.
Empowered to go the extra mile, to ask that extra question, to look a little deeper. And she said, we can't really produce exceptional health until our patients have a sense of empowerment, because the best healthcare is when the patient is in partnership with his or her physicians, plural.
Feels like a team.
Feels like a team, precisely. And then she said, and this was a kicker for me, she said, we are a community-owned hospital. We exist at the pleasure of our community, basically the county. She said, our community needs to have a sense of empowerment with us. If we're going to impact the health of our community, the community needs to have a sense of empowerment as well. And this is a community of, shall we say, declining economic opportunities, has been basically a logging community. And so economic activity is declining, drug and alcohol activity is increasing, all the bad stuff. And so her comment was spot on. The hospital, which is a hub of the community health,
Yes,
identified in collective empowerment. Now, at the moment, we didn't have an idea what empowerment meant. It's a big word. It's a cool word. It sounds great, but just what the heck is it?
yep.
But we started from that anchor. And by starting at that anchor, then we could start having these conversations and modeling. Okay, what comes after that? What kind of behaviors do leaders have to exhibit and model so that they could have a culture that was based on empowerment? And that's one of the things that was the final kick for me to start getting serious about this idea. And it was actually after that I started actually doing the research and eventually wrote a book. And so that's how all that got started.
Before I lose track of it, tell us about your book.
All right. Thank you. It's called Leveraging the Genetics of Leadership, Cracking the Code of Sustainable Team Performance. And what I discovered in researching organizations that consistently perform at a high level, not a year, 2 or 3, but for 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, 25 years or more. How do they do that from the standpoint of leadership? How do they consistently perform at an elite level? And what I discovered really was they don't allow every leader to come in and lead based on their personal values or what they think is a good leadership style. They're very clear. Like this hospital identified empowerment. Elite organizations say, this is what you are to produce. This is the impact that you are supposed to produce with your people. And I saw things like empowerment, collaboration, servant leadership,
Yep.
respect, relationship, team, safety, both psychological and in manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, physical safety.
Yeah.
And the two that sort of surprised me the most was love and grace.
Wow. For any corporation.
The love and grace one actually came from a principal of an elementary school that in 5 years, but it was really love and grace to a pathway of collaboration.
Oh.
In 5 years, this school went from was failing on multiple fronts. 65% of its student population qualified for a free or reduced lunch, which meant that it was not, there's a whole lot of neighborhoods that are worse, but it was in that group where there's a sizable bit of poverty. In 5 years, it was the highest performing school in the district of 25,000 students. And then when that wasn't good enough, they took it up another notch and actually became one of the few schools in the nation to close the achievement gap.
You think that it's all related to love and grace, or you think they had other things in that school system, or was it just the idea of love and grace? We're going to present ourselves in a loving, graceful way to our students.
When she told me that, that's exactly what I was thinking. And she read my mind. She said, that's not at all what I'm talking about. And so I said, okay.
I said, tell me, but tell us.
Yeah. She said, love and grace tells me that that I can have a difficult conversation with a teacher, staff member, but do it in a way that's kind and loving. And she said, I believe, and this was the idea of the pathway. She said, I want my staff to collaborate because I believe that the key to academic achievement is collaboration, or a key. And she said that doesn't happen unless there is a high level of commitment, love and grace, call it whatever you want, respect, relationship with the entire team. And this was when she came in, the prior principal had been run out by the teachers union, and there was open hostility with the staff. And when I sat down with her, I said, I want to talk to you about your approach to leadership. And she said, leadership? I don't know anything about leadership. She then went on to describe for me the most eloquent, detailed, thought out system, or a formal way of approaching leadership. And the funny thing was, I have this mental model of a system. It's the reason the book is called Leveraging the Genetics of Leadership is because the metaphor is a DNA molecule. Yeah. And in my head, I've got it all organized. And so she started off with the two sides of the double helix, love and grace and collaboration. Okay, yeah. I'm checking the boxes. And she got down to there was one, what I call a gene, or there's one part of the model left that she hadn't talked about, nor had she talked about the idea of grace. She talked about love, and we get down and my hour is almost up. And I said, okay, you've talked about love, you talked about collaboration, but you haven't used the word grace again in our conversation. And she pulls back the sleeve of her blouse like this, and she points, the word grace is tattooed on her wrist.
Wow.
She said, that's how we do innovation, which in my model, my mindset, that was the last thing we needed to talk about was innovation. And she said,
tied grace and innovation together.
Yeah, I wouldn't have made the connection, but she did.
I still don't. Yeah.
So here's where it connects. She said it takes 10 years for a good idea to get out of the halls of academia into the classroom.
Okay.
She said, when we're dealing with the lives of children, that's too long. If it's a good idea, we need to get that good idea into the classroom faster.
Yes. Yes.
So she said, I want my teachers to innovate and to collaborate one another around good ideas.
Okay.
And she said, we come up with some terrific ideas, but occasionally the good idea doesn't work.
Yeah. On
And she said
occasion.
that's when we have to learn to forgive ourselves. And she
Oh,
said, teachers are, as a group,
hard.
teachers are really passionate about education. And she said, when they come into my office and they tell me that this great idea didn't work, she said they are devastated. And as she's telling me this, she's points out to me Kleenex boxes that strategically placed around her office.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
she said, that's when we have to learn to forgive ourselves. And that's where I need to create a culture, going back to the idea of love and grace, and as a pathway to collaboration. She said, that's an opportunity to me to support my teachers and to support their passion and to say, okay, it didn't work. Let's get on.
So strong. That's so strong because just her idea of what grace is just itself. It takes
Yep,
sounds like it clicks off a lot of the genetics that we're referring to. Just the idea
exactly.
of her idea of how she applies grace. It's not
Yep,
necessarily being nice to people, but it's giving them room to make a mistake and to
yep,
forgive them for the mistake,
yep.
and giving yourself room to forgive yourself for the mistake, but learn
Right,
from it.
exactly.
Checks off a lot of boxes.
Yep.
In your book, you lay out the genetics and you say, okay, listen this. What's the best way for someone? Because here's what I say to all our listeners right now and in the future. Everything we've been talking about for the last few weeks since we restarted the podcast, all
Hmm.
about immersing yourself into it
Hmm.
and then implementing it. Before I ask the second part of the question, is your book on Amazon or can they order through Amazon?
Yeah, you could get it through Amazon. Actually, the best place to get it, frankly, is my website.
Okay, we'll make sure
Daniel.
we have that information. I also do a book page of all the
Okay.
podcasts we have books, so we'll have that
Yep.
information there, but be
Yep.
also in the notes. So,
Yep.
how does somebody immerse themselves? They got to get the book for sure to read it, but
Yep.
how do you implement this?
All right. I'll give you a couple of simple examples. They're really simple. And in fact, they're stunningly simple. Again, you got to start out with, going back to Eileen and the healthcare, they start out with a purpose of empowerment. What that turns out to be really is the experience of the workforce. What do you want your team to experience? And again, I heard things like relationship, respect, safety, love and grace, servant leadership, collaboration,
Yeah,
team. And if someone wanted to get technical, you could say we're all talking about the same thing. And I wouldn't necessarily agree or disagree.
yeah,
But high impact organizations, they narrow everything that they want to, that experience for their workforce down to one or two single key ideas. And then they say, okay, how do we do that? And so I'll give you, I love this story. The guy who, I forget his name, Douglas Conant, I think was his name. He was the CEO of Campbell Soup from 2001 to 2011.
yes. I
Uh,
think the name.
Credited with a major corporate turnaround. And yeah, he probably had some strategy in there and he made some really tough decisions in there. But what is he most known for? Personally writing 30,000 thank you notes to the employees of Campbell Soup during his
Wow.
10-year
Wow.
experience as the CEO.
That's implementing it. That's what you have to do to implement these things. Okay, this is what I have to do.
Yeah,
And I know the pushback's gonna be, well, that takes a long time. Doesn't it save you a lot of time?
that's the point. And so moving me to one of my hot button passion points, Glenn, too many, in my judgment, organizations are run by accountants and chief financial officers.
Yeah,
I work with a lot of them, so I have to be careful here.
but it's the truth. And so do I.
And yeah, and they have their place. Don't get me wrong, and
You do.
they provide invaluable service. But generally accepted accounting practices, they can note the expense of 30,000 thank you cards, but they can't capture the value of 30,000 thank you cards
Yeah.
on the life of the worker.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found universally with organizations of high impact that consistently provide an amazing experience for the workforce, but an even better experience for their customers, was some kind of acknowledgement of senior leadership to their staff. It was thank you cards. It was notes of appreciation, gifts. It was rewarding them for a great idea. So just a real quick example, and it's this idea of implementation. A manufacturing company that I looked at, they design and manufacture high-end commercial furniture.
Yeah.
No one's ever heard of them, but if I told you their customers, you would recognize every one of them because they're all major national and international brands.
Okay.
200 people. And when I was talking with the president and some of his staff too, I said, "What's your approach to leadership?" And he said, "We practice servant leadership." And after taking a tour, it's like, okay, that's what I saw. But one of the things that they do to engage their team, 200 people, 200 bees, they use servant leadership as a pathway to an engaged workforce to find and eliminate waste in the design and manufacturing process. And
Collaboration.
exactly. So when they say that, okay, what do you have to do that? You have to have collaboration. You have to have respect for your employees.
Yes.
You have to respect their voice. You have to respect their work. You have to respect their position, their view, how they see the operation.
So it points back to what you said earlier. Those have to haves all can be created from having grace.
Yeah, because I'm sure those employees occasionally screw up. But then I found it curious. Every employee, or not every employee participates, but on average, every employee comes up with 5 to 6, actually conducts 5 to 6 kaizens, which is a formal process of looking at a process, looking at an activity, and then testing a new idea to see if it works. And oh yeah, this does work. Every employee conducts 5 to 6 kaizens every year. Every one of those saves the company $1,000.
Okay. I can see that though.
And so this is the other part of it. They reward every employee with personal time off when they do one of these. And it doesn't matter if it's some big idea that works well, or if it's just a little idea, or if the idea doesn't work at all. They still provide the paid time off. In fact, they want Kaizen to be so embedded into the routines of their employees that they also reward paid time off if the Kaizen is a personal Kaizen or professional one.
How powerful is that?
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I heard stories of, so I'm curious. I go, okay, so what kind of, give me an example of a personal Kaizen. And one guy said, I needed to reorganize my sailboat. And so he used the Kaizen to organize his personal sailboat and got paid time off. And another guy, one of their senior leaders, he's probably, I don't know, his mid-30s or something. He said, I learned a valuable lesson. I did a Kaizen. He said, my wife was quite pregnant, and I had the brilliant idea that I was going to reorganize her kitchen pantry.
No, but okay. Give it a
shot. Yeah, evidently no blood was spilt, but a young husband learned his lesson. Yeah. But he got his personal time off.
You're not only empowering people, but you're giving them the responsibility, which I guess that is empowering. Responsibility, authority.
Yes.
Which means if you make a mistake, you're responsible for that, but you have the authority to fix that or to prevent that. That all feeds back to, okay, we're going to operate through an area of grace. So I think that, okay, I like that. That's very useful right there. If you let the audience pick it apart, but that's very useful. I wanted to ask you also, when it comes to your work, you're an author, so it's hard to get out and about when you're writing, but do you get to go out and do a lot of with people? to get to do that kind of work?
Great question. I'm actually transitioning my consulting practice that I've been doing for 25 years. I'm transitioning it to doing this kind of work with organizations and their leadership. So the simple answer would be not enough.
Yeah.
But the larger answer is it looks to be moving, and I'm very excited about some opportunities that seem to be on the horizon right now. And really, it's working with leadership team, asking that initial question: What do you want? What do you want your workforce to experience? Because the reality is, the workforce is going to take their experience, and that's what's going to get passed on to the customer.
Okay. That's a key question. I want to just spend a second there. What do you want your workforce to experience? What do we want our workforce to experience?
It's really different with every organization,
Sure.
and it should be. So when Eileen at the hospital said, we want our workforce to experience empowerment, they actually had to go in and define that. What does that mean for us? And that's another one of those implementation things. You
Oh,
just
yeah.
don't come up with a big idea. You actually have to define what it means. For another young guy, he's at the time this happened, he was probably 34-ish years old.
Yeah.
He got handed the reins of being one of 300 emerging leaders in a company of 19,000 employees, one of the world's largest engineering firms. They said, oh, by the way, now you're a leader. Okay. What does that mean? He had been a really good project manager. He knew how to design wastewater treatment plants, basically anything having to do with hydrology. Now all of a sudden, with no training, no background, no coaching, no mentoring. Oh, now by the way, now you are leading other teams with different disciplines,
Yeah.
different markets, cross market selling, geographically diverse. And I said, so what did you do? He said, well, I read a few books. I had no idea what leadership was about, but from my research, exact quote, he said, from my research, I determined that leadership is a relational enterprise. So he had
Wow.
to,
That just gets me to really thinking.
so this is the fascinating part. So this guy's an engineer. He takes everything serious.
Yeah.
And he is a classic engineer. He knows how to start with, this is where I want to go, and then work backwards of how to get there, which is exactly what he did. Now, so he started out from, my team needs to experience relationship. And he implemented that in a way that was relevant to his team, his company.
Okay.
Another healthcare organization, actually up in Anchorage, Alaska, it's a Native American owned and operated healthcare organization.
Yeah.
They start out with the idea, the concept of relationship and story. They throw the idea of story in there, and that drives their leadership, that drives how they deliver healthcare. But those two concepts of relationship and story are embedded into Native American culture already, culturally significant. Now they look at relationship differently the way that my friend Brian does, the engineer.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But it's both people, if you will, took the idea of relationship and applied it to their specific organization and made it work for them.
When we speak of relationships, we can go back to who I consider to be the grandfather of quality management, Dr. Deming.
Yep.
And he talks about, you got to break these walls down.
Yep.
So people can have relationships with each other.
Yep.
Get rid of the slogans. It's got those 14 great points. But when you're saying that, maybe I'll suddenly reflect back on that. And I started seeing where the genesis of some of these companies get messed up from the very start. There are no relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And even stepping back a step further, what they focus on is the results. The result of leadership is profit. The result of leadership is clinical outcomes.
Right.
The result of leadership is whatever that is, whatever widget it is that they're supposed to produce.
Exactly.
And there's a certain logic to that.
See where you're going, though.
But who is it that's developing, creating that profit? Who is it that's creating that value for the customer? Who is it that's putting that today? Who is it that's putting that shot into the arm? It's the worker. It's the workforce. And so if you want to create a certain kind of experience for your customers, you have to create that same kind of experience for your employees.
I think the challenge is that creating that same type of experience for employees is difficult because it's costly. It comes out of the bottom line. But I wonder which one's more costly, losing a customer or employee to go.
We know from the research that groups like Gallup does that an engaged workforce, meaning a workforce that is passionate, a workforce that's this is actually how they define it. The workforce is intellectually, psychologically, and emotionally engaged with their work, meaning they bring the best of themselves to the shop, to the office every day of the week.
How much of a concern, because it seems like it would be a concern, if these folks are bringing to the shop the whole ball game and I need to let go of them, if they make a mistake, it comes back to reflect badly on me.
That's the whole issue. That's why we have organizational leaders who operate from a position of command and control.
Okay.
Because they're scared to death that some mistake is going to come back on.
Because that's the culture we've been teaching.
Yes, my rules, my team, my rules, my way. And frankly, that probably worked 100 years ago when the size of an average manufacturing organization was probably 10 people. Today, we've got organizations of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people.
Or millions, yeah.
Or millions.
Yeah.
And go back to a different healthcare organization. This hospital system of 4 hospitals operates down in Mississippi. They were at an engagement levels with their employees of 96%, which is like unheard of. And they were in the 96th percentile, and they stayed there for last report like 3 years in a row. Massive accomplishment. When the CEO came in, he designed one of the few executives that I found that intellectually knew exactly what he was doing. He designed a system of leadership around the principles of servant leadership to create a culture of engagement with employees. And one of the rules, and this is, as soon as you start talking about a systemic way of doing leadership, it always comes with some behaviors, with some rules, and with some routines. One of his rules was, if you're a leader in this organization, you will take responsibility when your team fails. You will take that responsibility. Conversely, when your team is successful, you will give them the credit.
That's a rule that is out there, should be followed. A lot of people are not following that. A lot of people spend more time blowing their own horn.
Exactly.
Lets me know that they need work in self-awareness and self-esteem.
So there's another way of doing it. And what this particular executive did, it sounds extreme, but I found other organizations that did the same thing and they got the exact same results. This CEO said, we began a process every year, normal evaluations of everybody. He said, we tweaked them a little bit for leaders and said, if you're a leader or manager in this organization, you will be evaluated at a minimum of once a year. And your evaluation will be provided by members of your team, your subordinates, by a group of subordinates, as well as your peers, and by at least one, if not 2 supervisors.
So if I was clear on that message, you better believe I'd be showing grace, looking grace to my team members.
Exactly, because your team is going to be evaluating you. And part of that evaluation was, how well am I modeling these behaviors? Yes. As he described to me, he said, everybody is evaluated in part by those behaviors, at least once a year. And they are evaluated against the engagement levels of their team. If the engagement levels of their team drops below a certain threshold, that leader is going to be evaluated twice a year and assigned a coach.
Wow.
So it wasn't just sink or swim. No, they're providing coaches and mentors to help them learn how to engage their team.
Sink If they sink, get them out of the deep end and teach
Yep.
them how to swim.
Teach them how to swim.
I got to tell you, Daniel, a lot of the things we discuss just takes me off into a thought of how to better process this thing. So my mind is kind of drifting off because I'm starting to think, okay, how do I teach grace? How do I get more people to hear grace? So I'm glad you got a book that deals with that a little bit. You told us a little bit about the book, but where can people find you? Let's say we got 2 or 3 people out there right now saying, you know what? Let me see if we can talk. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I love that question. So here's my offer to anybody. I will give anybody at least a half hour, if not an hour. If you want to learn how to apply these in your organization or for your own personal leadership, I'll give you a half hour, an hour, because I like talking about it.
Yeah. Yes.
And the best way to get a hold of me is through the website, which you're going to post, but it's danieledds.com.
Yeah, we're going to post it. And sure, and again, ladies and gentlemen, just go to our website, Touchstone Publishers, go to books, go to podcast books, and you'll see Daniel's books there.
Yeah.
So you just order it right there, or you go to Amazon. But he said the best way to order it is through him. So I'll have the link for his, where you can just click on the link, it goes right back to him. Yeah. So you can order it that way. That'd be the best way to do it. Yeah. I got to tell you,
the other thing,
like a must read, so I'm getting it.
Great, thank you. But the other thing is, I'm just now finishing up my 3rd special report, which I've got 2 posted on the resource page already. One is on designing the leadership system to engage the workforce. The other one is developing a courageous culture, because that's one of the other things I found was high impact organizations have cultures that people are courageous. And I'm just finishing up the 3rd one, which is how to make servant leadership an organizational system. And that will be up and available probably within a week.
Super powerful.
Those are complementary.
Tease us just a little bit. Give us one from courage.
I love that one. Thank you. Cultures of courage are noted by people, by the team, by the workforce who have the courage to speak up. It's like this manufacturing company that I referenced. 200 people, each one contributing 5 to 6 formal kaizens on how to improve their operation, extract waste. That means that they have to have a culture where fear is being extracted from the workplace, and they're intentional about that. Fear is the most debilitating emotion any of us experience, and it stops us in our tracks. It kind of does. And Deming, you referenced Deming, he says that clearly, that if you can extract fear out of the workplace, you're magic. So, to tell your workforce, we want your ideas, we want your contribution. That means you have to extract fear out of that daily experience. One of the hospitals that I reference in the book, they've taken it even to almost a higher level. They recognize that a self-confident employee is the most important, most valuable employee they can have. So they encourage public speaking, because what do most of us fear more than anything? Public speaking.
Not you and me, but others.
Yeah, some of us don't know how to shut up.
Yeah, it's fun. So why would we fear something that's fun? You know what, though? That says a lot about an organization who's willing to do that.
Yes.
You hear people all the time saying, why would I train somebody for them to leave? Why would you keep somebody who's not trained?
Yeah.
So that's a powerful step, public speaking. Wow. So just out of curiosity, I don't do it, but do you do it? Do you help organizations with getting people to be a better public speaker?
Public speaking, no, but I have opinions on it.
Yeah.
When I was fresh out of college, I was in a Toastmasters club for probably 18 months.
Yes.
And anytime anybody says, how do I learn public speaking? I say, find a Toastmasters club and they'll teach you.
If nothing more than getting that, which has been my key lately, implementing how to be a good public speaker, go to Toastmasters.
Okay. Yep. I wouldn't disagree.
Implement it. If you're going to get it down, practice it. Yep. Practice it. It's fun. Okay. So that's good though. So I'm glad we have a way to get a hold of you, danieledds.com. One other question before I hit my final question. You start to think about how we're going. How are we going to survive, or not survive, we survived it, but come back from the pandemic? Workforce is coming back to the office, or maybe staying out. Just been a tough period of time for all together. Yep. What advice would you share with the leaders of all yokes to say, okay, let's build this back together?
Yeah. That's a great question. And there's probably 1,000 really smart answers. But this morning, actually, I was on a Zoom call with some of our state leaders, local leaders, and even political leaders from Washington, D.C. And a year ago, we couldn't have met like we did because we were all geographically dispersed. Yet here we are on it was a Zoom call, and we've got 400 people from all over the state, all over the country. And people are talking, we've got speakers, and they were all fabulous. It seems to me that this COVID thing has given us lots and lots of opportunity to do a reset,
Yes.
to do a rethink.
Yes.
I like to say, okay, we have all the technology in the world to collaborate, but do we know how to collaborate? The technology can't do collaboration for us. It provides the mechanism for collaboration.
Collaboration comes from the ears and mouth.
Yeah. And how little we might use our mouth to let other people use theirs.
Yeah.
But I think the opportunity is to really reset, to do a reset. Okay. In fact, I had this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine about an organization we're both involved with. It's a great opportunity to say, okay, what is our mission? What's our focus? What do we need to reset operationally, creatively, technically, all of those relationships, all of those operations that we've taken for granted for the last who knows how many years? We've got an opportunity here to reset and rethink.
That's a powerful lesson right there.
I'm always in favor of rethinking what we're doing. At least once a year, you take a few minutes and say, okay, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Is it working? Just seems to me that this is a natural time to do a reset and say, okay, what with our workforce, what is the experience that we have been providing our team members, our workforces, our employees?
There's a way that, like I said, the technology is just the means. How do you do it?
Right.
And the fact that you say resetting all happens. I know I used to use Slack all the time.
Yeah.
Now,
I just joined yesterday.
Yeah. And I need to kind of go back to it because most people, it's easier for people to get on Slack than it is for them to get on Teams. A lot of people feel like they got to have the Teams package, which is not true. But that's a good way to reset. Yeah, we're not going to, companies love how much money they're saving by not having people travel right now.
Yep.
They love that. They will have the occasional meetings, occasional get together. We as professionals have to get better using Slack. And I think every one of our CEOs better at using some kind of collaboration tool.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I said I had one more question for you. I do want to be respectful of your time, but I got to go back to one question. Something that you said. You mentioned that it's a real, we're talking about a solution. You said it's a real simple solution. And then when you said that, I started thinking, well, simple is oftentimes the best and the easiest solution.
Yep.
What do you think about just that paradigm that just jumped up in my mind as you said that?
Yeah. So I have an MBA from a pretty good school that I'm pretty proud of. And I am guilty of, if I can make something complicated, I absolutely will.
Yeah. You went to Wharton, didn't you?
Yeah, right.
I know that.
But in doing the research, what I discovered was people creating cultures of high impact, elite performance through some of the simplest means. Writing thank you cards doesn't take a PhD in organizational design to say thank you. Most of our mothers taught us to say thank you by the time we were 2 years old or 3 years old at the latest. Yet someplace between being a toddler and MBA school, we forgot how to say please and thank you.
That's so true.
The other thing, and I saw this universally with every organization that I looked at, although some approached it somewhat differently. But it was the idea, and if I was speaking to a CEO right now, and if I was speaking to just one right now, someone who, man or woman, who's responsible for other people, their chief executive officer, president, director, whatever the title might be, this is what I would tell them. Get your rear end out of your chair and go sit down with your people. So in the healthcare organization, they call it rounding. It's just a concept that comes out of when doctors would round to their patients in the hospital. Manufacturers use the term Gemba. It's the same basic idea. As a manager, your job is to get your rear end out of your chair and go visit with your team. see how they're doing, make sure they have what they need, et cetera, et cetera. And I saw this from small organizations of just a few dozen, frankly, all the way up to the United States Army with
Yeah.
2 million active and reserve duty personnel. And one of the earliest time I heard this story was I was having coffee with the chief medical officer of a large county-owned urban trauma center. This guy, by any measure, he's way too humble to ever say this, but he's probably one of the top trauma specialists in the country.
Okay.
And I was talking to him about leadership and this idea of systems and how to do leadership. And is there a way of doing leadership in a systemic way so every leader in our organization knows how to do it? And he said, let me tell you a story. He said, my prior CEO, we're talking about a CEO of a large urban that's connected to one of the nation's top medical schools.
Okay.
He said, my prior CEO operated off the 12th floor, top floor of the hospital, had a great commanding view of the city and harbor and snow-capped mountains to the east. He said, the only communication I ever had with her was through email, the occasional formal meeting, and a phone call now and then. And he said, the joke in the emergency department was always the 12th floor is calling, meaning that's where the executive suites were,
It's an emergency, yeah.
Yeah, he said the new CEO comes in. First thing he does, he moves his office from the 12th floor to the first floor, right in back of the admitting area,
Yes.
so he could have a sense of the rhythm and the pulse of the hospital and patients coming and going. And he said, I was actually shocked the first time he did it, but he will round to the emergency department 2 times for sure, maybe 3 times a week. He said, I can't quite put my watch to him, but he does it on a regular basis. He said,
That's a powerful lesson.
the funny thing is he is now able to take names, put faces with names. He says there's relationships being developed with the 12th floor or executive leadership. And this is exact words. He says, engagement and trust within my team for executive leadership is skyrocketing.
See, that is a simple solution.
Simple.
I know of a CEO who kind of same thing happened. It was decided he's going to tour all the different facilities, and he was just gotten appointed as the CEO of the airline. He's at all the different facilities. So he's at the Los Angeles maintenance facility.
Yeah.
So he's walking through the maintenance hangar, and he says, "Excuse me, just a minute." And he walks in the bathroom. Later, he's not out. And 8 minutes later, he's not out. Someone just walked in to check on him. They don't want to.
You don't want to lose the CEO in the bathroom.
You know what? They found him in there with his coat off, with a mop, cleaning the bathroom,
Washing, cleaning.
Yes. And they got all embarrassed. They said, "Oh no!" And he said, "No, I got it.
Yep.
I saw it. I fixed it."
Yep.
And that became the culture. Every maintenance man there loved him.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
They loved him. But it's a simple solution. Simple solution.
Simple.
Okay. I overran your time, and I apologize.
No.
I greatly appreciate you taking the time.
No worries.
To go a little bit
No
further.
worries.
Listeners got to eat this up. They've got to eat this up. What do they need to know? Bottom line, you say, okay, here are some of the most important things, or here is the most important thing that you need to take away from this conversation.
Say 2 things. Okay. One is start with the experience of your employees. Start there, and then identify 2, 3, 4, 5 behaviors that will best model that experience. Everybody has a set of core values, and someplace in those core values, there's going to be the word respect. What does that mean in terms of a behavior?
Yeah.
And that would be the 2 steps I would say is what's the experience, and then what are those behaviors that you expect every leader to model to make that experience a reality? Because we all know you could talk about trust and respect, but it takes one act of disrespect and everything comes unglued.
It kills the whole thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great session. I hope we get to talk some more and do it again. I think
anytime.
A lot more yet to uncover there.
Anytime.
Great luck with your book. It won't need much luck. Just let's get the word out. And
okay.
Don't forget, I'll put the website and everything in there.
Super.
we'll have this happening. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
Love it. Thank you.